As you can probably tell from the state of this bike, I've been having lots of fun on the Norden 901 since I picked it up. I've really been looking forward to riding this bike, and I have to say that so far it has not disappointed. Now, obviously, as Husqvarna is a sister company to KTM, a lot of reviews spend a lot of time comparing this to the KTM 890 and Adventure R, and understandably. But to be honest, that subject has been covered to death. So in this video, let's concentrate on exactly what this bike is like to ride, and inevitably comparisons will come up during that process. The Husqvarna PR machine says, and I quote, "Norden 901 allows you to follow your nose, knowing that the bike can take you big distances, tackle gnarly trails, and everything in between." And that is precisely what I've been doing on this bike since I've had it. It's the sort of bike that makes you just want to go out and ride and explore and take routes that you wouldn't necessarily normally take, because you know that whatever you're going to come across, pretty much this bike is going to be able to deal with. Now, whether you can deal with it is another matter, but it certainly is a bike for exploring. Now, it's going to be hard, obviously, not to compare this to the 890 Adventure in the KTM family, but I think that's been done to death, and the comparisons between the bikes, there's plenty of videos out there that will take you through all the specs. What I think is right, and what I've seen from a lot of the reviews, and what I found from riding this bike, is that it does sit slap bang between the standard 890 Adventure and the 890 Adventure R. And for me, that's why I think Husqvarna have really hit the sweet spot with this bike. It's not as off-road capable and as aggressive as the R, but it is more off-road capable than the standard bike. The engine's the same, the power output's the same, the suspension differs, and again it sits in the middle. This has got 220 mil of travel on the front, 215 mil on the back, and I think a 252 mil ground clearance. It does also come as standard with adjustable front forks. Obviously there's a lot of similarity between this and those bikes I've mentioned, and if you own or have ridden a 790 or an 890 Adventure, this does feel very familiar, but at the same time it feels different, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. It may well just be the bodywork, because when you sit on this with this panelling that you've got at the side, the bodywork that goes out, you've got more weather protection. Yeah, this doesn't go anywhere, I don't think. No, the big sign saying no motorbikes. I think I might need the next entrance. So yeah, as I was saying, it kind of feels like a mix between my 790 Adventure or an 890 Adventure and the Africa Twin. It's a very reminiscent sort of shape here. There's a lot more going on in front. It feels like you've got more coverage, not quite as open, and that's where I think this will work as a touring bike. If you're going to go adventure touring, you want to cover many more miles, then having this fairing on the front I think is going to make a big difference. This screen being fixed seems to work pretty well. Interestingly though, today on this helmet, not getting any buffeting, my head's not getting thrown around, but I am getting wind noise on the helmet from this screen. However, when I rode this back from KTM, I was wearing my X-Lite X1005 modular helmet, didn't get any buffeting and didn't get very much wind noise as well. So how the screen works is going to be very much dependent on the helmet you're riding, how tall you are, all those sort of things. One thing in particular is the fact that there's this gap now that you've got. So whereas if you wanted to fit a sat nav kind of here on the KTM, it has to really come forward of the speedo. On this, it's set further back, the screen, so you've got plenty of room to be able to mount something in here, and it's going to be tucked up out of the way. Obviously looks are subjective, and I think this is a pretty handsome looking bike. Interestingly, when I saw this at the NEC Motorcycle Live show, I was a little bit underwhelmed, and I think the reason for that is that it had the plastic protection covers over the headlight and the spotlights, and they just seemed to cheapen the look. Both myself and a friend, when I sort of arrived home and this was on the driveway and he come down for a cup of tea and had those around, and he said it looks much better than the one that we saw, which is odd. But by the same token, I'm the sort of person, I'm not that bothered about how it looks, it helps, but it's how it rides that's the important thing, and this bike is an absolute cracker. That 889cc 105 horsepower engine has got plenty of go, so if you really want to crack on you can do. But as I said in my 890 Adventure review, this engine with the heavier weight crank, the sort of more inertia and mass in the engine does make it a much more flexible and pliable engine there. Second gear at 40 miles an hour on that corner, no problem. My 790 would be complaining, so it's a peach of an engine. The riding position is really comfortable, the bars are nice and high. I think they feel higher actually than the 890 Adventure bars. I think it's got a good road presence, but when you're riding in country lanes like this, I've got a really nice view over the tops of hedges, you can see over the tops of cars. It's a bit like driving an SUV in that sense, and again I think that's why this bike really appeals to me. It is a bike that you can rag around if you want to. This bike will certainly tackle any off-road terrain that I want to go down, but with this extra bodywork and the fairing, it's also a really comfortable long distance tourer. KTM 890 owners that complain about the seat will be pleased to know that this seat is much more comfortable. I wouldn't necessarily say it's softer, but it's wider, there's more of a base to it. I spent probably 4.5 hours on this bike with a 15-minute stop for a cup of coffee when I picked it up, and I had no issues, no bum ache at all. Really like the seat on this. I'm 5'10", 32-inch inside leg, and it feels just right. It feels like everything's in the right place. My legs are not too bent, I've not got to reach for the bars. Obviously there's some adjustment where the risers can be moved about to tweak that fit, but it's the sort of bike that I instantly felt comfortable on. And I do think that is important, because the more comfortable you are on the bike, the more relaxed you are, the better the riding experience is going to be. This bike comes as standard with Pirelli Scorpion Rally STR tyres. They're a tyre actually that I'm looking to put onto my 790 Adventure, and I think I definitely will be making that switch because I've been very impressed with these. You can feel a little bit of buzz from them. They are a semi-knobbly tyre, but they grip well on tarmac, dry and wet, and the little bits of dirt and gravel that I've been doing, they've been pretty good on that. Obviously deep mud, nothing but sort of really big widely spaced knobs are going to do very much for you. But for the sort of gravel tracks and trails that I'll ride, which I'm going to do in a minute, they seem to work pretty well. They're a really good, I think, compromise of an all-round tyre. It's anything that's going to work off-road is not going to be as good on-road, and vice versa, but I think Pirelli have kind of hit a sweet spot with these. This bike's got a few extras on it. The quick shifter is switched on. It's also got the integrated heated grips, so these are controlled through this TFT screen, and this has also got the Explorer pack on it. So the bike comes with 3 riding modes, which I think are street, off-road and rain, and then you've got the Explorer mode, which is the same as the KTM Rally mode, and once you're in Explorer mode you can then start messing around with the throttle response and the amount of slip that you have on the rear wheel. That's all adjustable. In the off-road mode, as standard, it changes to off-road ABS, so it switches ABS off on the rear. And again, anybody coming from a KTM family will have no problems with the controls. Very simple 4-button setup, and navigating your way around this display is pretty easy. It's a good display as well, pretty clear. I've always liked the KTM Husqvarna sort of speedos. There's no messing around, there's no fancy graphics, just the key data that you want. This has got a few more fancy graphics on it because of the sweepy bits for the rev counter and stuff. I picked this up from KTM full of fuel. I rode home, as I say, I was out for 4.5 hours. I've been out riding a bit today and I'm still showing 140 miles of range. It's a pretty frugal bike, and this big saddlebag tank really does, I think, make a real difference, and 250 mile ranges are no problem. The tank is slightly smaller on this bike than on the KTM. The KTM's 20 litres, this is 19, so you do lose a little bit of capacity, but at the end of the day that's not really going to make that much difference. But it's not as muddy down here as I thought it was going to be. Oh, I'm losing my camera. We've got some pretty chunky puddles. As I say, it was properly raining horribly last night, or all day yesterday. This is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. But the suspension's soaking it up nicely, the tyres are quite happy on this sort of stuff. And as I was saying at the beginning, it is the sort of bike that you just go exploring on, knowing that whatever you come across, you're not going to have an issue with. Even Toyota Aygo's parked in the middle of the road. Now, I'm not a particularly skilled off-roader, so I tend to stick to the simple trails. I won't go smashing through here too fast because of that camera that's dangling out there in front on a long arm. Let's just change the modes. Motorcycle, ride mode, off-road, close the throttle, and we're off-road mode, and it is, as I say, going to be muddy down here. We'll see how these tyres do. I can feel them squirming a little bit. They're more designed for gravel than mud, but I don't think we'll have too many problems. It's not that bad. Actually, it's much warmer today than I was expecting it to be, so things have dried out pretty quickly. It's about 15 degrees. Thankfully this lane's relatively narrow, so we don't get many of the 4x4s down here to really cut big ruts into it. The only thing I've got to watch out for are walkers and horses. I saw some horses earlier, but I think they've gone the other way. But for me, this is about the extent of off-roading that I would want to do, and this bike is far more capable than just this stuff, but I would need to improve my skills before I tackle anything really tough. So I think I'm going to book myself onto an off-road skills course. Excuse me if I'm huffing and puffing, I've got really warm in this suit, and if I open the visor the audio's much worse, so I'll have to live with that. Or you'll have to live with it. A bit of fresh poo. I think these just missed the horses that are coming through. There you go, no problem. Apart from the van that's blocking the path. There we go. I had no traction on the rear wheel then, it was just disappearing down that bank. And the stuff that they've put down for the diggers is not that great either. So for me, as I say, I think Husqvarna have hit the sweet spot with this. It's somewhere in between the two existing KTM models. So if the 890 Adventure's not quite enough and the 890 Adventure R is too much, this sits in there nicely in between, and I think, as I say, it will make a really nice touring machine with that screen, the extra bodywork. There's just a little bit more coverage, a little bit more weather protection, and the bike feels a little bit more substantial. One thing I haven't talked about yet are the brakes, and these Husqvarna branded J-Hwan brakes have been really good. Lots of bite, really good stopping power. They've actually made me realise that I probably need to take a look at the brakes on my 790 because they are nowhere near as good as this. I can smell burning mud on the exhaust. I think I'm going to have to give this a wash, although arguably these bikes look much better when they're dirty. So yeah, there's not really a lot more I can say about it. As I said, if you're coming from that KTM Adventure family, it's going to feel very familiar, but also different enough to feel like a completely new bike. The engine is an absolute peach. I'm a big fan of this engine, and just the whole package I think makes for a really lovely bike. As I say, these are all personal opinions, obviously, all of these reviews, but for me this is kind of, it really does push all of my buttons. It's the sort of bike that if you only had one bike in your garage, this would do a bit of all of it. You could go touring on it, you could smash it down some off-road trails, you could commute on it. It just does a little bit of everything. I think it's nice looking. Some people don't like the looks, but as I say, looks are subjective. I've not really talked about negatives, but there are not that many really, to be honest. Some people might suggest that this screen not being adjustable is a problem. I found that's fine. It's one of those kind of, it's there, it does what it does, you don't have to worry about it. The quick shifter can be a little bit sensitive. I've had a couple of missed shifts on that, but nothing more than that. And as you can see, the back end of the bike does attract a lot of mud, but then I have been riding this in some muddy conditions, so not really that many negatives for me. I think it's a nice looking bike, it's great fun to ride, it's incredibly practical. It is a bike that makes you want to go and explore, as I've said before, and it will take you anywhere, and I think Husqvarna have done a fantastic job with it. And as I've been saying all the way through, it fits in between the 890 and the 890 Adventure R, and I think pricing wise is the same, but I'll put the price on the screen. But I think this is just slightly cheaper than the Adventure R model, but more expensive than the standard bike. As I say, this engine is a blast. So let's get past this little smart car. Don't think I even knew I was there, to be honest. This bike really is a lot of fun, and I have now got the serious wants. So I hope you found this video interesting and useful. It did end up actually being more of a comparison than I initially intended, but I guess that was inevitable. If you've got any questions or anything you need to know about the bike or would like to know, drop me a question in the comment section down below. If you haven't already, you can hit that subscribe button and I will be forever grateful. And all that leaves me to say is until next time, thanks for watching, take care, ride safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.